A Les Paul with a Floyd Rose. What the f were they thinking? Welcome back to the channel. I'm RJ Ronquillo. If you're new here, thanks for joining me. The Gibson Les Paul, the most iconic, single-cut, dual pickup, stop-tail guitar that exists. Well, most of the time. Yes, there are double cutaways, one pickup and three pickup versions, and some with vibrato systems. In fact, both Les Paul owners and the Gibson factory have been putting vibrato devices on Les Pauls since its inception, really. Bigsby comes to mind, of course, as well as the Maestro Vibrolas that were on the SGs. But a locking Floyd Rose tremolo? Now that's taking it too far, or is it? In this video, we're going to talk about Floyd Roses on Les Pauls, as well as try one out and decide whether or not it's a good or a bad thing. So I asked you guys on Instagram about it, and 60% said it was blasphemy. So what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments. As I said before, it's not uncommon for Les Pauls to have a vibrato system. I mean, the man himself, Les Paul, used one. Keith Richards had a burst with a Bigsby, as does Neil Young. He's got one on his 53. But for some reason, the modern tremolos, by the way, I'll be flip-flopping both of those terms, vibrato and tremolo, throughout the whole video. They basically mean the same thing. Modern tremolos, like the locking Floyd Rose, I don't think ever really caught on, and let's be honest, they've kind of been shunned by the majority of the purists in the Les Paul community, including me. I mean, I've never played a Les Paul with a Floyd Rose until today. But I think a lot of the criticism is that, Les Pauls with tremolos don't sound as good as the ones with the stop tails. There might be less sustain, less tone. And I'm not gonna do a comparison in this video. There's plenty of videos on that, which I'll probably link to up here or down there. So when and who was the first person to put a Floyd Rose on a Les Paul? There isn't a totally definitive answer, but with the very little research that I did, it kind of points to a very early 80s, possibly late 70s. And there are two guitarists that claim that they were the first.
And it was the first?
I was the first one.
Brad Gillis and Neil Schon, which would make sense because they were both one of the first people to use a Floyd Rose, along with Eddie Van Halen, of course. Neil Schon put a Floyd in his 1977 Les Paul Deluxe, which he used on the extremely popular, I think, diamond and platinum selling Journey albums, respectively, Escape and Frontiers. So all of the big hits, Stone in Love, Don't Stop Believing, all that stuff was recorded with this guitar.
But everywhere you hear like a Paul, this is the Paul on those records. And it was the first Les Paul ever to have a Floyd put on.
The Escape album was recorded and released in 1981, so there's that. And by the way, if you didn't know, that particular guitar, the Les Paul with the Floyd Rose, sold last year in an auction for about $250,000, $250,000. Now, Brad Gillis, who we all know from Night Ranger and his work with Ozzy, also claims he was the first.
Floyd had to send me a newly finished schematic for installing in a Les Paul. And I left my guitar there, and they weren't sure how it was going to turn out, which was scary for me. But I got it back, and it was great. And then everybody else did it.
He put a Floyd Rose in his black 70s Les Paul Custom, which apparently he used when he toured with Ozzy in 1982. But either way, they were obviously big fans of the Floyd Rose tremolos early on, and you can thank them or blame them for putting them in Les Pauls. So guitarists and the guitar techs themselves were routing out their Les Pauls and dropping in these early Floyd Rose tremolos themselves. I'm not sure exactly when Gibson started offering Floyd Roses on Les Pauls as an option or a custom shop option, but they did release a line of Les Paul customs in the late 80s called the Lite series, L-I-T-E. Now these were thinner bodied Les Pauls with simplified electronics. I think instead of 4 knobs, they either came with 3 or even 2 knobs. And they came with either a choice of a stop tail or a Floyd Rose.
Custom thin body, light, yet powerful.
And in the late 2000s, the Gibson Custom Shop offered the Les Paul Axcess, which featured a contoured heel joint, a belly cut kind of like a Strat, and also the option of either a stop-tail tunematic or Floyd Rose. During my research, I also discovered they released a short run of Les Paul Studios in 2012 called the Studio Shred, which is essentially just the Les Paul Studio with a Floyd Rose. I should also mention that the Floyd Rose wasn't the only locking tremolo to appear on Les Pauls. We also had Kahlers, which, if you're a big fan of Def Leppard and the late great Steve Clark, he used those a lot on his Les Paul customs, as well as the infamous Steinberger KBX, which appeared on several models, and I had the unfortunate experience of having one, as well as a bowl cut in an SG90 double in 7th grade. Regardless when they started doing it, remember this was the 80s, so this was kind of all part of the time period. We had guitarists that were pulling out Gibson PAFs and sticking them into Strats, and this new invention from Floyd Rose, it was kind of like an improvement on the older tremolo designs. So innovation and experimentation was all part of the 80s guitar landscape. But nowadays, if you show someone a Les Paul with a Floyd Rose, most would immediately frown and say, why would you do that? Or, you ruined that Les Paul. And I get it, you're kind of taking this iconic, legendary guitar design that's been around for 70 years now and routing out this beautiful maple top, sometimes flamed maple top, taking a big chunk of wood out of it, taking a chunk of wood out of the nut and the fretboard. And for what reason? Just so you can do cool dive bombs and wicked harmonic, squealy, shaky things and still stay perfectly in tune, sometimes even better than a normal stop tail. I mean, think about it. Did we make these same faces and these criticisms when Eddie basically gutted all of his guitars and modded them to hell? No, not at all. In fact, it was cool. So why all the hate when it happens to a Les Paul style guitar? Like, it's okay to do it to a Strat, but when anyone does anything to a Gibson Les Paul, everyone kind of freaks out. If you have any insight, let me know down in the comments. All this being said, I've never had an interest in playing a Floyd Rose equipped Les Paul until today. If you've been on this channel long enough, you'll know that I love Floyd Rose trems. I have several Super Strats with them. And even more recently, I've become a huge fan of Les Pauls. But together, that wasn't something that was on my radar. But thanks to the fine folks over at Gibson, we have a really interesting model to check out, not only with a Floyd Rose, but with some other cool bells and whistles. And this is quite possibly the most feature-laden Les Paul that they make right now. This is the Epiphone Alex Lifeson Axcess Standard. Now, if you remember, they did have a Gibson version of the Alex Lifeson Axcess a few years ago, but I think it's since been put in their legacy archive. But as of now, the only Floyd Rose Les Pauls that Gibson and Epiphone offers are the Dave Amato Signature under Gibson and then this Alex Lifeson under Epiphone. So I'm gonna plug this in, play it, and kind of show you all the features and what it's all about. So here are some of the features on the Axcess. Like I said before, we have the contouring at the neck heel joint, as well as this belly cut. You can see that there's more control cavities, which I will discuss in just a minute. Made in China, mahogany body, mahogany neck, maple top like a standard Les Paul. This one actually has Indian laurel for a fretboard, which is similar to rosewood. I think it might be a little bit lighter. Pickup wise, we've got the Epiphone Ceramic Pro in the neck and a ProBucker 3 in the bridge pickup. Both of these have coil splitting options via their volume knobs. Regarding the knobs, because there's a lot of push-pull pots going on here, they actually modded the knobs a little bit. There's like a little lip to help you grasp the top of the knob, which I always found hard to do with standard top hat knobs, because you always had to put your nails underneath. But this actually has a nice little like ledge that you can grip onto, which I think is a great feature. Beyond the two humbuckers, and something that I think totally separates this guitar from any other Les Paul that they have, is, well, not only the Floyd, but it's a special kind of Floyd. This is actually a Floyd Rose licensed Graphtec Ghost Floyd Rose. And what that is, it has 6 individual Graphtec Ghost Piezo bridge saddles, one for each string. So that's the reasoning for the extra control. We've got a battery for the Piezo, and this is kind of the electronics. It is routed in the back, so you can pull up on it. I'm curious to know if Brad and Neil routed the back of their Les Pauls when they first put them in, because I know that was like one of the very first Floyd Rose designs that they had. Going back to the controls, like I said, you've got push-pull pots to split the humbuckers into single coils. This is the master tone control, and this knob is actually kind of the volume on-off switch for the Piezo. When it's pulled up, that is the Piezo off and just kind of a standard dual humbucker setup. When it's popped down, then you have the volume knob for the Piezo. So when it's cranked up all the way, it's a blend of the Piezo and the humbuckers, and then you can kind of play around with different blends with this. This does have a dual output jack. Right now I'm in the combined jack, so it's blending the Piezo and the humbuckers together. The secondary output jack is if you want to take just the Piezo signal and output it to either an acoustic amp or another channel on a mixing board. Real briefly, let's check out some clean tones with the Piezo pickup. Here's the Piezo. I can turn off the humbucker completely and just have the Piezo. Or blend accordingly with any of the pickup positions. Truthfully, I'm not much of a Piezo guy. You know, I think the technology is cool. I think it's a really cool feature, but that's, you know, I just like 2 humbuckers and the Floyd Rose, so I'll probably just leave it off. I have to tell you, when a Floyd Rose is set up properly, it will not go out of tune, and that's great on a Les Paul. Okay, so what are my thoughts with this? I have to honestly say that this setup, Les Paul with a Floyd Rose, I actually prefer this more than my Super Strats with a Floyd Rose. And for one main reason, and that is the combination of the shorter scale length, so a Gibson scale length, 24 3/4, combined with the Floyd Rose. Anytime I've ever played a Floyd Rose guitar, it's always been kind of the Fender 25.5-inch scale length. It's great, but something about the shorter scale length makes this play easier. It's more fun to play. And I don't know if it's maybe the looser feel, the slinkiness of it, but there's something about it that I really, really like. Another thing about this setup compared to like a Super Strat with, you know, 2 humbuckers, I do like how on a Les Paul, the controls are out of the way. You know, when you get a Strat style guitar, the volume and the tones are usually like right here. But I noticed when I was playing this, it was nice to have a whammy bar and not have controls in this area for some reason. That being said, one of the cons is also that. I found that when I wanted to reach for the volume controls, because they were down here now, I had to hop over the trem arm because it's, you know, normally I would be reaching for the controls here. So it's not a deal breaker per se, it's just something you have to get used to, this kind of like hopping over the bar to get the controls as opposed to, you know, having them right here. One other thing that I noticed is the trem arm has a little bit of free play, meaning, you know, even though it's tightened down all the way, there's still a little bit of, you know, give before the tremolo actually starts moving. So the bar has a little bit of space that needs to be, I don't know how to tighten it up. If you're a Floyd Rose connoisseur like me, you kind of want the trem arm to be extremely connected to the bass, just for the feel aspect. So I would have liked this to be a little bit tighter feeling. But, you know, the fun of a Floyd Rose is I can do crazy dive bombs. And it stays in tune. So my final verdict, whether or not a Floyd Rose on a Les Paul is cool or not. Oh, what was that? You notice that Gallien Krueger 250 ML amp that Alex Lifeson used on some of those Rush recordings? Well, let's plug it in. So my final verdict, whether or not a Floyd Rose on a Les Paul is cool or not, I think it's totally cool. It's a design that I'm pleasantly surprised with. Going into this, I didn't think I would like it, but I do really, really like it. I'll be checking out Reverb to see if I can find one of those Les Paul Axcesses or one of those 80s Les Paul custom lights. That would be cool. But yeah, I would love to know your thoughts. What do you guys think about this? Let me know down in the comments. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. If you like this video, click that thumbs up, share it with your friends and family. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, gear demos and guitar lessons, click that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching. I'm RJ Ronquillo, and I'll see you in the next video.